Back in October 2021, I was doing my hourly marketplace search for Honda Elements and this one popped up. It was 10 minutes from my work, so I decided to go meet the guy at lunch. I got there and well, it was pretty rough. They've been using this as a delivery vehicle for at least 5 years, and it shows. The suspension's all wore out, it was dented, and the interior is very dirty. Since it was pretty rusty and had high mileage, I told the guy I'd give him $1,000 for it if nobody else bought it for $2,500. The next day he messaged me and said it's yours for $1,000, so I went and picked it up. These are some pictures of me driving it back to work the next day, and there it is back at work. The ride home that night was very interesting because it had bald tires and it was raining. Plus, take a look at all these lights. We have VSA, triangle, ABS, check engine, TPMS, wrench, brake light, and low fuel. And it was 2,054 miles past due on its oil change. Now, of course, the first thing I had to do when I got home was take a picture next to my other Element, and I got some pretty good comments, which ended up being true in the long run. The very first thing I did when I got home was turn the rear seats around and fill up the gas tank to get rid of one of the warning lights. After that, I did the oil change, and of course the drain bolt was completely stripped, so after a run to the Honda dealer, I was able to put the new drain bolt on and fill up the oil. I did notice the ground was pretty corroded, but I didn't do anything about it. The check engine light was on for a CAT code, but I decided to check the air filters just in case that's what was causing it, and they were very bad. Unfortunately, the new filter did not solve the CAT code problem, so I ordered a new CAT on eBay. The new CAT did successfully fix the P0420 code, and here's a before and after picture. The next thing I did was tackle this disgusting interior. I cleaned the seats and the floor, and I actually have a full-length video of this on my YouTube page, which I may or may not link above. We'll see if I'm able to figure it out. For anyone wondering, I did the seats with a Bissell Spot Clean Professional Series, I believe it's called. Here's a video of the Element pulling my boat out of the water for the season, and in the driveway with both Elements in the old boat. This car had the classic torque converter shutter, which feels like you're driving on rumble strips out of nowhere, and then if you let off the gas, it'll stop. And most shops, even most transmission shops, will sell you a new torque converter, but all you need to do is change the fluid. And this car, I had to change the fluid 3 times in order for the problem to be resolved, but it shifted incredibly, and that vibration stopped after the 3rd change. Here's the new fluid going in, and always remember, only use Honda ATF, don't use aftermarket. I decided to take this car on my work trip to New York City, and I was about 500 miles from home and the check engine light started flashing out of nowhere. I went and got the codes read, and it turns out there was no code stored and it never flashed again in the 8,000 miles I drove it after that happened. When I got back from New York City, I had to run up to Toronto Pearson to pick up my cousin and her husband that just got married in Jamaica. So what better way to pick them up than in a backwards facing Honda Element? After that, there was a very similar scene to what happened at the Pinedale Shopping Mall in 1978. Turkeys were falling out of helicopters and one landed on my Element, like a sack of wet concrete. The next things I fixed were this driver's side fender liner that would rub on the tire every time you would turn. And when I went to go tighten the parking brake, I found out why it wasn't working. There was no parking brake and the cable was cut. The cables were on back order, so I never fixed it. Also, I noticed a ton of play in the back wheels, and it was this control arm bushings, which are a huge pain in the butt, so I never fixed those either. One thing I did fix was the camber on the back tires. You can see how badly they were tipped in, and my tires were wearing out like crazy. This was a brand new tire not that long ago, and it's already bald on the inside. One thing to note when you're changing the upper control arms is both the nuts are welded, so do not try to remove the nuts or you'll break them as I did. And then you'll just have to remove the bolts. So you might as well just remove the bolts in the first place. Here's the old and the new upper control arms, and the new one installed, much better now. After that, I changed the driver's side back wheel speed sensor, and that fixed the triangle, VSA, ABS, and the red brake light. We had a really bad storm with snow up to the hood of the Element, and even with bald tires, it got out of its parking spot like a champ. Both front axles had terrible vibrations, and I've never seen axles seized into a hub so bad in my life before. I was heating them and using this rental tool from AutoZone, and it took me at least 4 days to get both of these axles free. The CV axles fixed the vibration under acceleration, but I was still getting a vibration around 60 miles an hour that would last until about 80. And this was the cause. The rear U-joint was very worn out, so I had to replace the whole drive shaft. Now that the vibrations were fixed, I had to address the clunking noise over bumps. So I replaced all 4 sway bar links. When I got back from the Dragon, it was the latest and greatest thing to replace your PCV valve, so I did that too. I had put about 7,000 miles on at this point, and all of those were on bald tires, so I got these new used tires and cleaned up my rims. The most exciting part of my ownership with this car is that I was able to be in it when it hit the distance from the Earth to the Moon, 238,900 miles. So I celebrated with a stay at the Element Hotel in downstate New York. I was really enjoying this Element. I was using it for work, for long road trips, for people hauling, facing backwards. I took it skiing a few times. I towed my boat all over town with it. I really liked it. Then suddenly one day I impulse bought a new Element, and I didn't want 4 cars insured at the same time, so I had to sell this black one. I made a very detailed advertisement, and I even included these videos showing that the motor and transmission run good. I made sure to clean the car up nice before taking the photos, and here are some of the photos that I had on the advertisement. I originally paid $1,000. I had about $1,600 just in parts into it, so I listed it for $3,500 just because I knew I would get lowballed, and I think that was a fair price. Now keep in mind that it had 241,000 miles because this is very important for the next step. As soon as I listed it, I got bombarded with text messages. So the first person I responded to when they met me at work the next day, I met the guy bright and early. He told me that he had several Elements, and this one was going to be for his son for his first car. He told me his son didn't have a lot of money and $2,500 was his max he could go. He was already there, had the cash in hand. I had in my head I needed $2,600 for it, so he bumped his number up to $2,600 and I accepted. Here he is pulling away. I was very sad and started to cry inside. Fast forward about 2 months, and I was on my usual Element Marketplace search because you never know what you might find. And I saw this, and it made me mad. I usually don't get mad at literally anything, but this I was furious. If you don't know, you can change the cluster in the Element dashboard in less than 5 minutes. So that's what he did. He changed the mileage from 241 to 127, and he tripled the price pretty much. If you're thinking to yourself, Alex, how do you know that's your car? Well, I know it is. Here's a stain that I put in the back seat with my rototiller. It only has front mud flaps because that's all I put on. And the license plate in the picture matches the license plate he used to drive it home after he paid me. I posted this on the Element Facebook group and somebody actually messaged him, but of course he denied. The main reason I was upset is because if the new owner ever took legal action against the DMV for odometer fraud, it would come back to me because I was technically the last owner. And just as I was forgetting about the whole situation, I see this on Marketplace. And yes, it's my car. Notice the lack of rear mud flaps. At this point, it was kind of funny how a $1,000 car that was maybe worth $2,500 turns into a $10,500 car. I messaged the seller, who turned out to be a small dealership, and he said he did find out the history after he bought the car, but he didn't seem too concerned about it, so I wasn't worried. It just sucks that somebody's out there driving in a rotten Element that's worth a fraction of what they paid for it. The moral of the story is always run a Carfax report. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. Before you buy a car, run the Carfax.